The smell of burning flesh filled the laundry room before I realized it was my own. I screamed and yanked my arm back, but my father pressed the blazing cast-iron clothing iron even harder against my wrist. The metal hissed against my skin. Tears blurred my vision. I couldn't even hear my own voice over the pain. Dad never raised his voice. He smiled coldly, calmly, as if burning his own daughter was no more emotional than ironing a shirt. He leaned close enough that only I could hear him. "One statement from you." He slowly lifted the iron from my wrist. Steam rose from the blistering skin, "and you'll both disappear forever." I collapsed onto the laundry room floor, clutching my arm against my chest. The pain was so intense it made me nauseous. From the hallway, I could hear police officers entering the house, paramedics shouting, someone calling for another medical bag. Dad unplugged the iron, placed it neatly back on the ironing board, then looked down at me. When they asked, he straightened his shirt. "Your mother slipped. You arrived afterward. You saw nothing." Then he opened the laundry room door and calmly walked outside as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just branded his own daughter. 30 minutes earlier, I'd been asleep after a 14-hour shift in the trauma ICU. My phone exploded with incoming calls. "Mom, mom, mom," then one final voicemail. I answered. All I heard was whispering, then sobbing. Then Naomi, her voice barely existed. "Help me." The line went dead. I was already grabbing my car keys before I realized I wasn't wearing shoes. The drive to my parents' house took 11 minutes. It felt like 11 seconds. Every red light lasted forever. Every mile made my chest tighter. When I pulled into the driveway, the front door stood open. One porch light flickered. Something immediately felt wrong. I ran inside. The living room looked as though a tornado had torn through it. A shattered coffee table, broken picture frames. A lamp lying upside down, blood smeared across the hardwood floor. My heart stopped. "Mom," no answer. I followed the trail of blood into the kitchen. She was lying beside the refrigerator, barely conscious. Purple bruises already surrounded her neck. Her breathing came in short, painful gasps. I dropped beside her. "Mom." She reached weakly toward me. Her fingers trembled. She couldn't finish. As a trauma ICU nurse, I recognized the signs immediately. Manual strangulation, airway injury, possible internal swelling. I checked her pulse, weak but present. I grabbed my phone. Before I could dial, sirens echoed outside. One of the neighbors had already called 911. Within moments, paramedics rushed through the front door. Police officers followed. Everything became controlled chaos. Medical equipment, questions, radio traffic. A paramedic gently moved me aside. "We've got her," I nodded, then looked around the kitchen. Dad wasn't there. Officer Daniel Mercer approached me. "Are you Naomi Sinclair?" "Yes, we'll need a statement." "I know." He nodded toward the ambulance crew. "First, let them stabilize your mother." I watched them load Mom onto a stretcher. Her eyes found mine for only a second. She looked terrified. Not of dying, of talking. Dad suddenly appeared in the hallway. His shirt was perfectly clean, his hair neatly combed. If I hadn't seen the blood on the kitchen floor, I would have believed he'd just returned from dinner. He looked directly at me. "Naomi, we need to talk." I stared at him. "No." He smiled politely for the benefit of the officers. "It'll only take a minute." Officer Mercer glanced toward us. "Keep it brief." Dad gently rested a hand on my shoulder. Anyone watching would have thought he was comforting his daughter. Instead, he guided me toward the laundry room. The moment the door closed, his entire face changed. The warmth disappeared. Only anger remained. He locked the door. I stepped backward. "What are you doing?" He walked toward an old ironing board standing beside the washing machine. On top sat Grandma's heavy cast iron clothing iron, the kind that stayed hot forever. He plugged it into the wall. I frowned. "What are you doing?" He never answered. Instead, he watched the small orange indicator light waiting. The silence became unbearable. Finally, the light clicked off. He picked up the iron, tested it against an old towel. The fabric immediately smoked. Only then did he look at me. "When Detective Brooks asks questions, you'll tell her Carol slipped." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I watched the ambulance take Mom away. I saw the bruises around her neck. "You tried to kill her." His expression never changed. "I asked you a question. I'm not lying to the police." His jaw tightened. "You don't understand." "No, you don't." I reached for the doorknob. He blocked my path. "I'm leaving." "No." He lifted the iron. "You'll tell them exactly what I say." I slowly shook my head. "I won't commit perjury for you." He smiled, a slow, terrifying smile. "I knew you'd say that." Before I could react, he grabbed my left arm, forced my wrist onto the ironing board, and pressed the scorching iron directly against my skin. Pain exploded through my entire body. I screamed as the smell of burning flesh filled the room. He didn't even flinch. He simply watched, then whispered, "One statement from you and you'll both disappear forever." He lifted the iron. My knees gave out and I collapsed onto the floor. Outside, someone knocked loudly on the laundry room door. "Sir," a police officer called. "Everything okay in there?" Dad unplugged the iron, straightened his shirt, and unlocked the door. He smiled at the officer. "My daughter's upset." Officer Mercer looked past him and saw me on the floor. He noticed my blistered wrist and the tears streaming down my face. His expression changed instantly. "What happened?" Dad answered before I could. "She accidentally grabbed the iron." The officer looked directly at me, not at Dad. Slowly, I pushed myself to my feet. Every heartbeat sent another wave of agony through my arm. Looking past Officer Mercer, I noticed a woman in a navy suit stepping through the front door. A detective's badge was clipped to her belt. "I'm Detective Alina Brooks," she said. "I need you to tell me exactly what happened here tonight." Dad's eyes locked onto mine, warning me, begging me, threatening me. I looked down at the blister spreading across my wrist, then toward the ambulance carrying my mother away. I took one slow breath and made the decision that would change my family's lives forever. "I'm telling the truth." I gave my statement with my burned wrist submerged in a bowl of cool, sterile water. Every few seconds, another wave of pain shot through my arm like electricity. But the burn wasn't what hurt most. It was watching my father stand 20 feet away in the kitchen, calmly sipping a glass of water while detectives photographed the blood where my mother had nearly died. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't crying. He wasn't asking if Mom would survive. He was watching me, waiting to see if I'd lie. Detective Alina Brooks sat across from me in the dining room and switched on a digital recorder. "Naomi, I'm only going to ask you once. If you need a break, tell me." I nodded. "When did you arrive?" "About 12 minutes after my mother called." "What did you see?" "The front door was open. The living room was destroyed. There was blood on the floor and my mother was in the kitchen, barely conscious." I swallowed hard. "She had bruises around her neck." Detective Brooks wrote it down. "Did you see your father assault your mother?" "No, I arrived afterward." "Did anyone pressure you to change your statement?" Slowly, I raised my burned wrist. "He did." The room fell completely silent. She looked at the injury, then back at me. "Tell me exactly how this happened." I described everything: the laundry room, the old cast iron, the smell of burning skin, his words, and his threat. No one interrupted me. When I finished, Detective Brooks quietly turned off the recorder. "Thank you." She stood, walked into the kitchen, and faced my father. "Mr. Sinclair, I'm Detective Alina Brooks. I need to ask you a few questions." Dad smiled politely. "Of course, I've got nothing to hide." I almost laughed. He had nearly strangled one woman and burned another, yet somehow he still believed he could talk his way out of it. Meanwhile, an emergency physician examined my wrist. Dr. Andrew Collins carefully removed the temporary cooling dressing. Even after years in trauma medicine, he struggled not to look. The skin had already blistered. Parts were white while others had turned deep red. He sighed quietly. "This wasn't an accidental touch." I looked at him. "What do you mean?" He pointed toward the injury. "People who accidentally touch a hot iron instinctively pull away. Without touching the burn, he traced its edges. This required sustained pressure. Someone held it there. He documented every measurement, every photograph, and every observation before looking directly at me. "I know you're a nurse, so I'll be honest. This scar will probably stay with you." I looked at my wrist. For the first time, I realized he was probably right. The burn would heal, but it would never completely disappear. 2 hours later, Mom regained enough consciousness to speak. Detective Brooks asked if I wanted to sit in. I shook my head. "No. She needs to talk without worrying about me." I waited outside the room for 37 minutes, long enough to imagine every possible answer. Finally, the detective walked out. She didn't tell me what Mom had said. Instead, she asked, "Would you like some coffee?" That caught me off guard. We sat in the nearly empty hospital cafeteria. She stirred her coffee slowly before speaking. "Your mother isn't ready to tell the whole truth." My heart sank. "She denied it?" "No, she confirmed there was an argument. She confirmed she was injured, but she's terrified." I closed my eyes. "She's afraid he'll kill her if she talks." Detective Brooks nodded. "I've seen this before." "So have I," I whispered. As an ICU nurse, I'd treated women exactly like my mother, women who apologized for broken ribs, claimed they walked into doors, and insisted everything was fine while staring at the floor. I never imagined my own mother would become one of them. That afternoon, my older brother Travis finally arrived. He rushed into the hospital looking exhausted. The moment he saw my bandaged wrist, he asked, "What happened?" Dad, his face went blank. No, I don't want to hear this. I stared at him. You think I burned myself? I think. He struggled for the words. I think everyone's emotional. I couldn't believe it. Mom almost died. His voice grew louder. Dad said she slipped. I laughed bitterly. Slipped into fingerprints around her own neck. He looked away. He said you misunderstood. And the iron, he said you grabbed it. I slowly stood. Every movement sent another sharp stab of pain through my wrist. Come with me, he frowned. Where? I led him into the treatment room where Dr. Collins was changing my dressing. The fresh burn was exposed. Travis immediately looked away. The doctor glanced at him. Family, my brother, Dr. Collins nodded. This injury wasn't accidental. Travis looked back in shock. What? The burn pattern showed prolonged contact, not an accident. Dr. Collins quietly left after explaining that. Travis looked at my wrist, his voice shaking. I didn't know. I met his eyes. You didn't want to know. He had spent years believing the easier version of Dad instead of the truth. Detective Brooks later returned with witness statements. Neighbors had heard screaming, and one clearly remembered Dad yelling, "You're leaving here in a body bag." Another witness saw my car arrive after the violence had already started, destroying Dad's claim that I caused the fight. Over the next few weeks, investigators gathered evidence. The house showed signs of a violent struggle, and Dad's story kept changing in every interview. Detective Brooks told me the truth never needs revisions. Then Travis found Mom's hidden phone. Deleted messages revealed months of threats from Dad. If you leave me, nobody will ever find you, and the next time you call the police, make sure they bring a coroner. They showed years of fear and control. Mom finally told the full truth, describing 34 years of abuse. Travis also handed over old phones, notebooks, and recordings where Dad threatened both of us. His own words became some of the strongest evidence against him. At trial, doctors, detectives, neighbors, Mom, and Travis all testified. Dad insisted on taking the stand, but his recorded threats and repeated contradictions destroyed his defense. The jury found him guilty of assaulting Mom, burning my wrist to intimidate a witness, and related offenses. Protective orders were granted, and Mom was finally free. A year later, my scar had faded into a thin silver line. I no longer hid it. Mom built a peaceful new life, and together we planted a maple tree as a reminder that healing keeps growing. During Domestic Violence Awareness Week, I shared my story with healthcare workers. I told them the most dangerous sentence I had ever heard wasn't a threat. It was, "Everything is fine." One young nurse later thanked me for giving her the courage to help her own sister. That evening, Mom asked if I ever wished I had lied. I looked at my scar and answered, "The scar healed. Living with a lie never would have." Dad believed fear would silence me. Instead, it became the proof that finally set us free.